pushing for this hard to obtain but entirely worthwhile.
Oh, okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. I think this is the first event that discuss about the role of the UN Special Rapporteur on Democracy. I think it's a good discourse for all of us. That obviously this is new proposals and then new initiatives that carried by the civil society in thanks for democracy without borders, who are highlighting, convening, and gather some support on this. But first, I would like to start. I'm agreeing and echo Andika and Thomas Garrett's presentation as highlights how is the UN special rapporteurs on democracy should be looks like. And then how the functions. The most important is how this can be encouraging or improving and enhancing democracy in the coming future. So I would like to take the angle from the Asian perspectives, because that is why the Asian Democracy Networks, as the largest democracy coalition in Asia, joining the efforts and then carry forwards the spirits as we believe the same with other continents. The Asia is actually populated by let's say half of the world populations, where we know there's a rapid shrinking of democracy in many sectors. At least now we only have 12 countries that still upholding and try to defending and promoting democracy. We also know we are in Asia. We have two largest population of world population, which is have two different poles. One is upholding democracy, one is disbelief of democracy. I think that is posing very unique situations on political and democratic dynamics within the continent itself. We also experience the different level of democracy that owned and practicing by different countries, which is not equal. Amidst unprecedented clamor for more democracy in the regions, we are still heavily suffer deteriorating from Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and many other countries, including my country, Indonesia, who just suffered very bad elections. I think the proposal for UN special rapporteurs on democracy is very timely and very relevant. This is a statement from the Asian. And then in these very pressing times where we saw very less global leadership that played by traditional or conventional leaders of democracy, and no enforcing mechanisms actually can be putting as a highlight, as a responsible for the country, except human rights mechanisms. Because, for instance, like freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and associations, and others rights that really related to the democracy. So we see the democracy is very intertwined and very close with the human rights that can be really equipped within the both interconnections. We believe only in democracy society, with the democracy governments, the real human right respect can be further enforced. It's not only about the hardcore human rights issue, but this can be includes other relevant democracy and human rights, such as transparency, respect to the people franchise, as well as the respect of the minorities. So the UN special rapporteur on democracy role should be able to consolidate not only around the human rights but also democracy, since we recognize there is no such role that played by the UNs or any interstate bodies, including ASEAN, so all the bodies that we are already recognized. And then the UN Special Representative for Democracy, in addition to whatever that the previous presenters already says, they can play a role to provide guides in upholding democracy. They also can assess or review, including to address the crisis and then address the concern of democracy that happenings in the recent times. This is the very hopes that we try to put in. Of course, the challenges is there, but we see this is very relevant and very timely. I'm going to stop from that and then perhaps then invite some more interventions after this. Return to you then.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Pam Chuchu.
Hello, I'm Yu Jung Hong, and Thomas and Annika and giving a speech on the point of the U.S. Special Rapporteur on democracy. So I just say to you why the main foundation endorses the UNRD statement. The foundation has been a partner since November 2023 when the foundation joined the UNRD statement. We hold the forum every year and we set the main thing that we think about basic questions such as whether the minimum condition for life can be protected in the absence of democracy and human rights. And if only one of them is fulfilled, it will be okay for human beings to live. The bottom line is that democracy and human rights need to balance in order for humans to live a minimum standard of living. And that's why our foundation has joined this campaign. In addition, in many Asian countries are faced a backslide of democracy due to autocracies and military governments. According to a report released by the Britain Institute, South Korea, which is regarded to well-developed democracy in Asia, is currently at the beginning of the authoritarian state. Not only that, but the conservative side has submitted to dissolve the Moving Forward Party, which is one of the Democratic Party in Thailand, and the Thai people estimate the MFP will be dissolved in high potential. It started with democracy being shaken, but as a result of this, various human rights-related issues are constantly erupting, and also polarizing issues such as ideology, gender, and rich and poor are getting worse day by day. And it is the second reason why we are to endorse this statement. Actually, special rapporteur on each country report on human rights issue, but we need to focus on specific to issue and system related to democracy. UNRD cannot only investigate information on the progress and regress of the democracy, but also investigate the problems and issues that are arising in relation to the degree of democracy. It could also play complementary and intermediary role to a country's special rapporteurs by considering problem and spill over from not just one country, but also from neighboring countries, and could prevent issue before it becomes larger and more permanent. Through the UNRD operations, it would consolidate the UN's role as an international institute that listens to the needs of each country itself, makes the insightful judgment on the issue of multiple countries. And also, I think the UN would inevitably work with civil society organizations to strengthen their monitoring. I'm not saying that UNRD is not only measured to protect the democracy, but hopefully it will be the least we can do to protect the democracy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, David, and thank you all for having me here today. Thanks to Democracy Without Borders for taking this initiative forward and raising its profile again. I really don't have, I think, a lot to add to the wonderful comments that have already been made. I will say that I think that there is value in pulling the threads together. Both Annika mentioned this, Tom mentioned this, we've all sort of mentioned this in different ways. I had someone actually yesterday evening ask me when I mentioned I was going to be on this panel, someone said, well, our organization didn't sign on because we felt that this was already something that was covered by a lot of the different countries and democracies that already existed, and why aren't they carrying this mantle forward? And I thought, that's a great question, but countries that are democratic aren't monoliths. They're not all the same. We all have different perspectives that we come from, we have different lived histories, we have different experiences, we have different priorities. And the governments themselves that are sitting in these multilateral organizations like the UN have their own interests. And having a single person that can pull these threads together, that can be a neutral voice, is incredibly important. And so maybe I'll leave it at that and have some other comments for some of the other questions that may come. So thanks, David.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Mr. Supriati, I think you lightly touched on this, on the question of human rights and democracy. Do you think that democracy is a human right? And how does the inclusion of democracy within the framework of human rights enhance the effectiveness of the effort to promote and protect democratic governments?
Yes, indeed. When I was in the human rights class, there's one semester to talk about democracy and human rights. And when we put in the tables, the connection between human rights and democracy, we have to define first what kind of democracy we're talking about. If you're talking about franchise, free and fair elections, transparency, respect minorities, the right of women, then you will find all the checkbox. You know, there's a cross-cutting between the columns and then the rows. And they're also relevant to many, not only UDHR, but also so many like ICCPR, CRD, CEDAW. So I think all the checkbox about democracy is giving indication to the human rights. And so that's why I think for decades, we in Asia, we found difficulties since we don't have any, organization that particularly working on democracy. But the work of democracy itself were spread in many of human rights activities. Like I mentioned earlier, like freedom of expression, association, and assembly was invested within the work of the human rights activists. And then women's, children's are spread all over. So that's why we all finally realized why we need to establishing one organization that works and then pulling all the threads and discuss and expanding issue on democracy. So I think for that ends, there's very strong democracy relations with the human right. And then most important that we believe only within the democratic society and democracy government, the respect of human rights can be maximally addressed.
Anyone else want to add to that among the panelists? Thank you. I mean, we know that it's in the UN language, but it's not as an idea, but it's, as far as the form of government is not considered in the UN Charter or other documents. I guess the next question is for all the panelists is how civil society organizations and other democratic movements can leverage the establishment of the Special Rapporteur for Democracy to mobilize support for their efforts. And I guess on the other side of the equation is how can civil society organizations and democracy movements contribute to the shaping of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Democracy. Anyone want to take that?
I can start. So in a past life before I joined Counterpart International, I worked on freedom of religion or belief as a human right issue from a policy perspective, and engaged quite frequently with the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. And in that role, civil society, religious leaders engaged the Special Rapporteur, whether it was Ahmed Shahid or Nazila Ghanea, who is the current Special Rapporteur for FORB, to ensure that the Special Rapporteur knew what issues their specific communities were facing, and what were the issues and how framing issues for them and their perspective was really important. So I think civil society, community leaders, movements, democratic movements, social movements have a responsibility to utilize these positions, utilize these special rapporteurs to help them amplify their issue. That there's a lot of noise out there, especially with the growing discourse around democratic backsliding and safeguarding needs. And civil society can really utilize this individual this position to make sure that the nuances of the issues that they're working on are brought to the table. And so they can shape it. They do shape them, and at least in my experience of current special rapporteurs. And so it's a unique opportunity, I think, for civil society to be able to outline that mandate as well. So I'll do that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think actually we are using a lot of the languages. Actually, for example, the Fabian Salieri is one of the special rapporteur leaders that we are helping him because of most of the Korean people and all these people cannot speak English, so we can gathering the basic information about that and then interview instead of him, and then we are the compiling of that and then we giving him, and then he can understand why we are lead to the UN system and the UN mechanism to the adopting in the Korean system. So I think we can, it's the same thing if we are the UN ROD will be the status inactive, and that time so we can gathering the basic information in the Korea and the others, Indonesia and the other countries. So then that's why the civil society is a real work together with the UN Special Rapporteur.
You want to have to?
As far as I recall, there are no countries that have actually signed on to this officially. Many are very receptive and they're discussing it, but to me it just argues that civil society must continue to champion this issue to your governments, also then to democracies and regional multilateral gatherings, because it really is a civil society inspired idea. And again, I don't believe there's a lot of opposition among democratic nations to this idea. They are looking at the obstacles that Hannah outlined within the multilateral system. But this is, I think, where civil society must continue to be the torchbearer for this. And then I do believe probably within the next year, we'll start to see that dam break and we will see one country then followed by a grouping of others, perhaps.
Just to continue, just pick up what Tom said. I think civil society need to work a lot in some of the increasing similar and build similar understanding between civil society and the state, because in Asia many states does not really they're accusing democracy as a Western culture. They don't realize many of the things that they enjoy, the freedom, etc., is actually part of the democratic society. But civil society itself looking democracy differently, as many of us still working on silo. I think we have to admit in this. Even we're not talking about remote, even the big civil society from the big countries, such as Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, we are still working separately in different issues. This we have to accept. We have to look in democracy as a one, one room that actually can contain many aspects there. So we need to work amongst the society. We need to speak with the state before the state really endorse it. And then we also realize the word democracy is not very welcome in the system. Although SDGs actually talk about human rights. SDG 16 also talking indirectly about democracy. So I think we still need to do a lot. Tom is very confident next year, so then break. So I think this will be synergized with the bronze lobby work at the national level. Because I believe national is the forefront of the lobby, advocacy, and then also struggle. Back to you, Dennis.
I hate to pick on you, but you spoke about obligations of individuals and civil societies, but as far as, I'm asking Thomas here, as far as COD, is this something that can be pushed on member states or organizations or IGO like COD to advocate for this?
Well, we have had just a discussion, a very brief discussion. We have started at the Community of Democracy something called the Democracy Platform, which gathers our member states that are on the Human Rights Council in advance of the sessions of the Human Rights Council to try to coordinate activities that are coming up. And so we have had some discussion, but it's not really been a formal agenda item. I would think that next year is the 25th anniversary of the Community of Democracies. And so most likely I could see this being, something civil society really brings a lot of pressure forward on, but also for its inclusion as a discussion point within the agenda, perhaps even this year in the Governing Council meetings, 2 of which take place annually. And as I said, I guess I'm thinking mainly of our Governing Council members who I don't believe there is an opposition to this idea, but it's just, again, government states move very slowly and deliberately when they create a special rapporteur's position. You may have seen, there are various special rapporteurs the United States, for instance, is uncomfortable with. And they don't always appreciate the things that certain special rapporteurs say about issues in the United States. And so very definitely this is something that they're going to approach very cautiously, but if the pressure is continued, then they will continue to respond.
Thank you. So I don't know, so what would be the next step if we were to move forward on this?
Well, Andreas and Democracy Without Borders is constantly looking to add more signatories, more support to this. He's always looking for an opportunity to speak about this. And so I know that there was a gathering of transatlantic, European, North American democracy groups a few months ago, and he made certain to try to really push this at every point and lobby the group during the breaks. And so I would say just again, support Democracy Without Borders efforts to continue to keep this alive in front of people.
And Asia Democracy Network, is that something that you could also promote among you?
Yes, since we agreed to be part of it, I think there is an effort from our side to elevating the acceptance of that kind of ideas. Even last year's on November, during our annual assembly, ASEAN Democratic Assembly, we have that kind of mechanism annually, but next year will be biennially. We're putting as a one pointers about the importance to have like a focal points within the UN, which is invested within the UN Special Rapporteurs on Democracy. And I think what next we need to do is try to increasing the awareness and then leveraging the acceptance of these kind of ideas among civil societies. And then whenever we have a chance, we spoke with like I said, friendly governments about these ideas. But unfortunately, we saw there's not much friendly governments right now in Asia talking about democracy. Back to you.
So, Mr. Hung, May 18 Foundation, the spirit of democracy, spirit of the May 18th, that has spread to other parts of Asia and also in the rest of the world. How do you see your foundation role in promoting something like this?
Actually, our foundation also has a forum in every year, and also we are connected a lot of the organization in Asian countries. So actually, we are spreading the campaign, the banner and the other thing, and also we are promoted in our social network, and they can sometimes the people who is active in Asian countries, they can asking us, and the time we are the knowing that why we are need to the UN ROD and the others, we get together for the pushing from this, and also sometimes we are looking to the Korean embassy and foreign affairs, but this current situation, the Korean government is very strict and also conservative party, so we can. It is very hard to connect with the government, but we still do together in Korean civil society, and also we push the government.
And Courtney, you spoke about Counterpart International has not signed on to this. Oh, you have, okay. How do you see is that an obstacle for other organizations to have the same thinking initially, that maybe this is not a pressing matter?
For us, it's important for Counterpart International and the work that we do, facilitating, bridging with different partners around the world and providing, facilitating access. And for us, it's at the core of what we're doing.
Right.
Of being able to promote and advocate for special rapporteur on democracy just feels right? It feels very much a natural part of the work that we've already been doing and have been doing for almost 60 years. I think, in talking to a colleague who I'll leave nameless and their organization nameless, I think for others there's a feeling that there is duplicity and that duplicity can actually create additional obstacles and create almost too much noise. But from Counterpart's perspective, I don't think you can have too many voices, especially in this increasingly hostile environment to democracy. And so to me and to Counterpart, this is the right time to continue to push for this call. So
Great, yeah. So since let me go back to you talking about in what way you think the special rapporteur on democracy can complement the existing mechanism to promote democracy and human rights at the national, regional, and international level.
Sure. I think that one of the biggest assets to having somebody in this role is, and this has already come up, I think, in a few of the comments here, is that this actually provides a neutral voice to amplify issues and to ask tough questions or ask questions in environments that are otherwise quite tense because of the variety of perspectives, especially in multilateral engagement opportunities that there are different competing interests. And so for me, the complement actually really is being able to amplify the issue, provide that neutrality, and to really kind of push the envelope in ways that might not otherwise happen from others that are at both a national, international, regional basis.
Thank you. So you think there's any lesson that can be drawn? I think that Annika has touched on this too, but from the existing special mandates holders, we have, I think, 58 to 59 country-specific and thematic mandates. Is there any lessons that we could learn from the existing mandate holder as far as how to promote democracy and human rights using this platform?
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's really, and where I've seen there to be some successes has been around a few issues. One is really around the partnerships that the Special Rapporteur can build. As I mentioned, the work that I had done with the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief was one of that mandate holders' successes, was around creating partnerships, being able to have access where others might not have otherwise had it, especially in terms of being an advocate for particular issues in that sort of neutral space. So that would be something that I would put out there. The other piece would be around accountability. Again, is having that country neutral in many ways, although every mandate holder is from a particular background, being able to provide that accountability for civil society, and again, to be able to amplify and provide that voice. Regardless of, I think, the tensions that come with the different mandate holders themselves and where their issues fall, I think that is a lesson around accountability to take forward.
Anyone want to add to that? One of the panelists?
No.
Maybe we can stop for questions from the audience. You can raise your hand and stand up. Yes, please. Go ahead, if you can announce your name and And it's
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah,
organization.
my name is Chang Ho Kim. I'm the staff of the Open Society Foundation, and also but just joining here because I'm based here and just have a knowledge audience. So it's kind of not much about this special rapporteur on democracy. I mean, and as a concept, I mean in support of that, but because of most of the speakers here mentioning about the current situation of the democracy and the backsliding and so on. So, but just wondering. Because this year is election year, starting from Taiwan, Indonesia, South Korea, and obviously in the U.S. So I mean, and I think that like biggest threat, to the democracy, obviously, what will happen in the United States. And this is a kind of not a political statement, of course, but at least I think that civil society and also a lot of the democratic government also needs to have some kind of scenario planning. So I mean. Let's say, kind of, looking back on your experience, let's say, in Thomas in the community of democracy, or like literally in the ADN, what are the lessons, learned, what kind of action, let's say, civil society organizations or like COE or the other, let's say, like the democratic supporters can take, or what are the actual impact of the previous Trump administration in the U.S. to the democratic situation year in. So I mean, I'm not saying what would be the result of the coming election in the U.S. But I think that it's important to think about the potential scenario. I think so. That just wants to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Anyone?
We try.
Yeah, I'll try to speak to that. First, let me just say one other thing. I think coming back to something Courtney had mentioned in this idea that there are some concerns that the Special Rapporteur on democracy might duplicate efforts of the other Special Rapporteurs. And I think that's something also to the question of what can civil society do, is I think continue to help shape what this is and what this isn't. Because I know every time the conversation is had about the Special Rapporteur on democracy, someone will say, but what about Freedom? What about Freedom House? They already, and I think this idea is that a special rapporteur isn't there to try to set indicators or, that's, instead a special rapporteur would instead draw upon all of those and kind of help bring that into some type of a discussion, bring that into some type of focus. The other thing I think about a special rapporteur that would be interesting was the United Nations itself avoids that word democracy, but they believe and they like to say they support and promote democracy. It's just very hard to get it into official text. But the UN thinks of itself as supporting and promoting democracy, and I would think that a special rapporteur might actually speak to that. How is the United Nations itself as an agency, as a multilateral body, conducting itself democratically on democracy? So the year of elections are unfolding. We've heard that maybe you were concerned with what has happened in the Indonesian election. I know people are concerned looking forward towards the US election. There's also, though, I want to point out that in some elections, it's been interesting, elections that the experts had all said are rigged against fairness. In Guatemala last fall, in Pakistan recently. It's interesting that this flood of new voters is overwhelming all of the names that governments have set up to rig the election. And I think that's also something perhaps we need to really look at is people flooding, people power is, I think, really overcoming some of the negatives out there. And I think for the United States, vote turnout is going to probably be the key. Who turns out to vote? And, is it going to be young people, which is the focus of this conversation for this summit? Because they will probably, you can't take for granted how they will vote, but probably they'll be voting in a way that is more in favor of democracy and transparency. So I hope sort of that answered. One of the things I did, just in closing, I just wanted to say is, I felt like too many democracy analysts approached this year saying it would be a bad year. I know in Europe everyone is saying it's going to sweep populism. And instead it's not necessarily doing that. And I think we need to look at this idea of the majority of the world's people will have opportunity to vote. What can we do to support that and make that really matter? Sorry, I'm done.
Well, responding to the question, if I may
Yes,
respond
yes,
to it,
please.
Chan Ho, right? Chan Ho, you asking about how to respond to the crisis or to respond to the challenges that are happening these years, especially about the existing challenges in many few countries, plus the opportunity around the election itself. So I just pick up elections. I think the real powers or the real support should be delivered maximally to the national stakeholders, because the regionals, maximum we can do as ADN, I believe as COD, or many of us in here just writing statement on open letter that later on we'll be putting in the corner of our website or being ignored by authorities. But the real deal, the real people arrested, the real people get kidnapped, tortured, is locals. And then the real people who will fight, who will be on the streets, is the national. So that's why during these years, we elevating our national consolidations. We believe our national consolidation is a one way to unite civil society as part of the working on silo. So for the first times, and then we did it for the last 3 years, we're pulling people together. We're pulling different organizations, sit down together, talk, don't work. We encouraging, we're promoting work together and fights in the same, same directions. So for the first time, they just realizing, oh wow, we're not just about talking about elections, not only about electoral groups. Talking about land right, not about the indigenous people or the national human rights groups. Some will work very well, but some is like a disaster, since like national civil society sometimes is very politicized. They divided for various reasons. So I think this is the role of international or regional organizations like us. Bring them together, give them resources if any. Unfortunately, ADN cannot provide a lot of resources, and providing space for them to fight better and to fight with the longer cycles. And about the elections, just if you're taking an election as an opportunity, I think we will see there's a lot of loss in the election. The reasons Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and next maybe I hope Korea not happening. It's just because they're preparing, but let's say the bad guy preparing very well. For the last 5 years, incumbent president, for example, my president is ready to prepare this. All the ecosystem, mechanism, infrastructure, money already been planned. While civil society, maybe they just wrote proposal last year with very small resources to really working around election monitoring, election safeguarding, which is they use the very ancient electoral monitoring methodology that we used 50 years ago. While the recent fraud, the recent let's say, capture or rigging is very complicated, very delicate. They're using the IT, they're using international global financial system, they're using media communications. They use all. Mm-hmm. So we are not very pessimistic about the upcoming election happening in Asia, but of course, at least not happening in Korea, right? We're still really hoping for Korea. So this is just a brief kind of like illustration of how we're looking at the current challenges, and then the hope around the elections. Back to you, David.
Bring it back to the initiative for the UNROD. Since you're talking about other mechanisms, is there any other mechanisms that would be, if the UNROD is not something that can be successful, is there other mechanisms that you can think of to promote democracy?
Would the special rapporteur could be impactful, or?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that there's the UN has like working groups and things like that. I mean, is there any other mechanism out there that panelists that you can think of that can also help with the promotion of democracy?
Well, Well, I think by having a special rapporteur on democracy, they're not going to be only limited to interacting within the UN space, right? So if there's a UN special rapporteur on democracy, they're able to intersect with what the community of democracies are doing. They're able to intersect with what OGP is doing. They're able to intersect with other activities. And I think to the question really on kind of elections, having a special rapporteur for democracy can actually help remind us that this isn't just about elections and the outcome of elections, but where do the impact of these processes mean for democracy writ large? And then there's going to be different entry points in different mechanisms to be able to do that, like I mentioned around OGP. So what is the implication for good or bad elections and countries on their OGP commitments, for example? And then a special rapporteur could help push those and amplify those types of issues. So I think that in many ways it's almost limitless of which are the right mechanisms for the special rapporteur to engage with. But in the absence of not having a special rapporteur, it makes it harder to continue to amplify and push those issues forward.
Is there another question from the audience?
Okay, hi, my name is Fran. I work with Coordinated Counterpart. Mr. Garrett, you talked about how democracies move really slowly in adopting special rapporteurs and whatnot. So while that adoption is taking the time that it needs to take, what can civil society do to work together to promote democracy while the UN is, and their member states are slowly getting to that place?
Well, I think just continue to speak to government, speak as a watchdog, speak as an advocate. We have a working group within the community of democracies made up of states as well as civil society groups called the Working Group on Enabling and Protecting Civil Society. And I think one of the key things that it does is it issues calls for action when there are troublesome legislation coming, when there's dangerous actions being taken. But it also takes positive statements when a country does something right. And I think that's the type of thing we need to see more of. And when a country that is perhaps rated only partly free by a Freedom House, but when they actually do something right on a labor issue or on an issue of gender equity, issuing that positive statement, I think, is just as good as issuing those calls for action on negative things. But I use those examples, but really, I guess probably the bottom line of it is that, constant pressure, constant communication. I think, you can't just suddenly step up when you realize there's a dangerous activity coming. It needs to be constant. It needs to be all the time a two-way street.
We have time for a couple more questions. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Lina from the Bridge International. I want to ask about North Korea, one of the most oppressed and oppressed country in terms of human rights and democracy. They have form of election, and also they have national assembly. But basically, civil society, anything is not allowed. So in this context, what do you foresee the UN's future involvement in the democratic development in North Korea?
To respond.
It reminds me a lot of Libya. Libya was under Muammar Gaddafi. Being in civil society, being anyway identified as civil society was a death sentence immediately. And so really when Gaddafi left power in Libya and civil society began to develop, it developed from a totally blank slate. There was nothing, not even a little bit. There wasn't, doctors' associations. There were homeowners. There was nothing. And I guess that's going to be the situation with North Korea in that day of eventual future. I thought the young man who spoke this morning sort of outlined that. We have elections. We have a constitution that grants us these rights. And it was only when he came here and saw them in action that he realized how much of a sham that was. And so Yeah, just start, but I can just tell you as we look at Libya today, and you see all of the tragedies still unfolding there, I think it's difficult to underestimate what it means to see a system go suddenly, if North Korea does this, from this absolute lack of any civil society, absolute lack of any awareness of what being a citizen is, to sudden freedom. It's going to be a very slow and difficult process. Fortunately, South Korea is here, and that's going to be the critical difference that Libya is lacking.
Yeah.
It had actually neighbors that wanted it to fail, rather than, in this instance, Japan and Korea will want to see a positive future for the people there.
Yeah, please.
Well, we know when you say North Korea having election and having parliament there, it must be not come from the really standard process of free and fair election, because it requires certain of the point that we need to check in order to meet with the standardized competitive elections. And I believe parliamentary also have problems. But we're talking about the practices of the civil and political rights within the election and the parliamentary rights and performance. But I guess we have to admit many international bodies fail to address this kind of, let's say, unsuccessfully to address the human rights situations in many countries, including in North Korea. I think if you're asking me how does the UN or international body will respond, I have no idea how they respond. I think this is very complicated issues. I say it because I'm civil society. I have liberty to say that without any diplomatic laws or ways. But I guess many countries will similar like North Korea. We're talking about China, it's 1.6 billion population. We talk about maybe 2/3 part of the India, which is still under BGP ultra Hindu controls, except southern of India. We're talking about Vietnam, Laos. Let's say half of Asia is still in very difficult situation. I have no idea how the UN special rapporteurs are able to address every concern of human rights and civil political rights. Even I saw the Human Rights Commission Council also still have facing problems. But our hope from civil society perspective, at least we can work with the half of those democratic countries to addressing, to highlighting, to upholding, and also empowering organizations like us. Interstate community democracy. The presence of the special rapporteurs will providing a lot of opportunity, a lot of space, and also the encouragement for civil society to opening new arena of working, of playing, thinking, etc. So I think this is timely that we have to do and very relevant. Especially, I highlight less leadership, democracy leadership that play by international bodies. I think this giving impact and effect, as well as a lot of questioning after the Ukraine and Palestine's crisis. Many of the people starting to question about the democracy. So, giving back to you.
Yeah, sadly, some of the countries that you mentioned are also on the HRC, countries like Vietnam and China. Is there another question from the audience?
If I could just say one other thing to the point that she brought up. It is always fascinating that in Russia they're promoting the idea they just had 3 days of elections and that there are elections in North Korea and so forth. I haven't thought this all the way through, but I always feel like there's maybe something there for our groups to twist on to get the special rapporteur on democracy, because all of the autocracies call themselves democracy. And you may remember, so we're now in the third summit in this process. At the first summit, Beijing and Moscow both issued those formal statements saying, because they were invited to that first summit, well, we're democracies and here's why we're democracies and we're better democracies than you people. And so it's very interesting, everyone wants this democratic label to be put on top of them. And I don't know if there is some way that, we can take that and use that to our advantage for the special rapporteur. It's probably too clever by half, but it
must be important since they want it on
Since they
their name.
demanded so much. Yes.
I actually just add Connor to your point. I think one of the themes that we've heard, even with the Global Democracy Coalition events last week, was around the narrative and taking back the narrative and reshaping that narrative. And that's something that a special rapporteur could do, especially around countries such as the DPRK, where there are challenges and where governments themselves have their own interest in what they say as a country, but the special rapporteur being able to sort of help redefine that narrative to challenge some of those issues.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, it's a question and a little bit of a comment because I think I heard about it. It's quite interesting to see what kind of research or recommendations this kind of special rapporteur can provide. So you also mentioned about, let's say, monitoring the index of the OGP score, based off of that. So I think maybe one thing which maybe I'm not quite sure if it can be within the scope or outside the scope of this discussion is because there are like two aspects of the democracy. Democracy, how to promote democracy of the democratic principles inside the country, and how the one country, let's say the US or the South Korea, can promote democracy for other parts of the world. And I think that democracy is also not a monolithic concept, and also each country, let's say take the example of the South Korea. So it's also, again, it's really not a political statement, but when you look at the index, on the democracy of the freedom of the press and so on, we are seeing the sharp decline of the index, in the domestic level in South Korea. But in the foreign policy aspect, South Korea hosted the regional forum of the Summit for Democracy last year, and also this year, like the Summit for Democracy, and also they expanded the ODA amount. So, how to and related to the North Korea, this government also improves, increase the amount of the support for the North Korean human rights museums and other North Korean human rights related budget. So I think it's kind of how to address kind of domestic issue and also the foreign, policy aspect. Again, this kind of, the motivation can be a bit different. How to promote the democracy, for in the international arena or the foreign policy arena. But just wondering if this kind of ideas on how to promote democracy, in outside the country level, it may be within the agenda of this UN Special Rapporteur, or it may be in the in other scope of discussion. Just wondering.
Anyone want to answer?
Actually, the special rapporteur on democracy investigated most of the countries, how can develop the democracy and how can they spread over the other countries. Actually, for example, in South Korea, actually we are gathering most of the Asian countries want to know how can we develop the democracy, how can we progress the democracy movement in Korea. So actually that time we thought every time that how can we delivering about how can we the progress the democracy movement, and also UN RODs will be investigating about how can develop the democracy in each country. They can spread write a report about it, and also the UN can a recommendation to those countries how can they deliver it. Actually, the one of the guidance note about the TSA. At that time, the UN having some guide how can you fulfill the TSA mechanism. So the UN also can do, if the UN already can investigate about developing the democracy, they can making the guidance note and the other thing. So they can, the Asian country and the others, Africa can run about and adopting. How can they which one is the good thing to them? So they can making a democratic system, which is adopt their country.
Thank you. So, if we can have closing remarks from the panel, maybe starting from the other direction with Courtney.
Well, this has been a really rich discussion, and I'm not sure I have any words of wisdom as we wrap up, but I think we've all made a case for why this is important. And there's different perspectives that we all bring to the table from our different perches and our different kind of organizations and histories that we've all come from. And so, I think as speaking from both Counterpart and on behalf of the Global Democracy Coalition, where Counterpart is a co-chair or co-coordinator, it really is incumbent on us as civil society to continue to push this request, this call to action, this call for a special rapporteur forward. And it behooves all of us on both the practical level and the work that we all do, but also in terms of sort of the global world order. And we really do have a responsibility to be calling for this.
Thank you. Ms.
Truly, we all know that the democracy and human rights are very important to our life. And so we request the UNROD will be enacted that. And I also hope that if the UNROD will be enacted, the UN will be a set process about the sanctions for the resolution that goes beyond the recommendations. So we all to do together, and I also do process about when will be the setting the UNROD.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, I'm going to say visit the website and then take part on behalf of individual or organization to endorse it. But it will take a while before the real approvals or UN and we have special rapporteur on democracy. Meanwhile, I think it is our obligation to keep navigating our crowds as actually that we expecting for ROD. And you know, also releasing few navigations for many civil society in Asia or member individual how to approach, how to pursue the advocacy and navigation. Please also visit our website, advertisement. I mean, it's like try to be with the crowd, united, consolidated among yourselves. Try to kill silo, working more in unity, because trust me, the bad guy is very strong and the resources of the good guy is very small. The field is very small and then everybody busy. So try to be united as we fight very giant enemies. Thank you.
So when Democracy Without Borders took the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights as sort of a motivating factor in pushing the Rapporteur on democracy, never at any moment have they said this is just an exercise of tilting at windmills. They intend to push this until it happens. And I agree. Yet let me just say that I think the push is going to be as important in some ways as is the final victory. And so the push is going to be of value as well too. So I, again, join the others in encouraging you to sign on, to be a part of this, foster these conversations, and they will contribute to something very strong, I'm sure, today.
Right. We have 155 civil society organizations and institutions and American Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy is one of the signatories. There's also more than 400 individuals who sign on to this initiative. So I would echo the call from other panelists to support this initiative. I think as closing, we've seen that Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights has proclaimed support for democracy, and we've seen the same support or the same language in the ICCPR. In spite of all the competing narratives or competing forms of government, democracy is still the best guarantor of human rights and individual freedoms. So we hope that this event has elevated awareness about the need for the special rapporteur on democracy. We hope that this will foster a collaborative network among civil society, government officials, and other stakeholders to support this initiative. And possibly the event like this may give partners of this campaign, most notably the Democracy Without Borders, strategic recommendations and concrete next steps for advancing this UN IOD campaign. I would like to thank the panelists for this very informative and productive discussion. On behalf of all the partners jointly running this campaign and all the signatories who supported in supporting this campaign, I would like to thank those in attendance and kindly ask again for your help to move this forward. Thank you.
So we are finished earlier, right?
Yes. We have time to get to the next one.